Hi, welcome to the Bargue drawing course. My name is Juan Martínez. We're going to be going through an academic style of drawing training known as Bargue drawings, and I'll explain that in a minute. If you already have some idea what that is, that maybe is why you found this video. But if you have not heard about it but are interested in improving your drawing skills or in a system of training your drawing abilities, then this might be for you. And it certainly has been a type of course or training method for many people over the past almost 200 years. The history of Bargue drawing, first of all, they started in the 19th century in Paris, France, which at the time was I suppose the epicenter of the art world, although there were academies and various ateliers around the world, and particularly in Europe. There were important ones in not just Paris, but also in Rome and Germany and Russia, Spain, Britain. There were certainly many systems. The French was kind of considered, I think, the quintessential academic training program. And so people from all over the world would go to France in the 19th century to study in Paris in the academic system. And what the academic system did was, I mean, it was training, first of all, training the artist, just as anybody would be going to art school and so forth, perhaps today, or different schools and academies that exist. They did that then. Most people were not self-taught. That's probably more common of a recent phenomenon, partly because there's just more and more resources available to us broadly than there was 150 years ago. So people tended to understand they had to go and train. They had to either be trained with a master or a guild or an academy, depending on what era you were at. And so the Bargue drawings arose in the mid-19th century as samples for students to work from. And Bargue, that's a personal name. His guy, might as well say it finally. His name was Charles Bargue, and he along with his friend and mentor, Jean-Léon Gérôme, another fantastic artist and teacher, very, very highly regarded and popular teacher and artist of the 19th century in France. They came up with this series of drawing samples. And they're called plates because they were actually prints made from lithographic blocks, which are stone blocks that are drawn on, and then there's paper put on them and certain materials and a specific kind of ink that then transfers the image that's on the stone onto the paper, and you can make multiple copies. So there's no real original. They're called artist's prints or artist's proofs. Plates is just the general term used for anything that's produced in that sort of way. A lot of them are actually copper plates that were etched into and then inked and then printed. And so the term plate just refers to any of these printing processes that were very, very common in those days. So the different schools, academies, and teachers could get hold of these series of plates produced by Bargue to use for their students, with their students. And up until that point in time, really, this was not a new thing to have sample drawings to work from. That was very common throughout teaching history, the history of teaching art, that students, especially in the drawing stages, which is the foundational stages of representational art, and I think we can say that today even, that they first started by copying these drawing samples. And the thing about the Bargue plates, which are widespread now, that in those days, in the middle of the 19th century, 1868, I think they were released, they became instant hits because they were so good, so beautifully done, and extensive. They went from the 110, I can't remember exactly, but there were many of them, and they had different types. Like some are more simple and diagrammatic almost, rectilinear, and then more and more evolved, more difficult, more complex, but with different challenges, some more challenges of rendering, other ones more of complexity, and also there were life drawings and even copies from masterworks. So there were different stages that the student could do and often was expected to do. So that is the kind of thing that is often taught today in what we call the academies today, or the ateliers, the schools that go through this system. And after this, I'll talk about it later, but after the copy drawing, you're also doing life drawing, you're doing copies from statues or plaster casts in charcoal and so on. And eventually you end up painting and carrying on. All of this developed over time. But the foundational stuff, the drawing, is done beginning with these copies of Bargue drawings, and that's what we go through. Now, we'll go through the methodology, but also I want to maybe mention why this might be useful to you, depending on where you are in your current artistic journey. Because, first of all, it doesn't matter what you want to, it does matter, of course, but as far as doing Bargue drawings, it doesn't matter what your final goal is in terms of your art. Do you want to be a concept artist? Do you want to be a comic artist? Do you want to work in film or television or gaming or fine art or fantasy, or do you want to do still life? Anything. It doesn't matter. Landscape. It really doesn't matter, because the drawing skills are important in any of those genres. And Bargue drawings are specifically designed, really, to help a student advance, either attain or increase or hone or improve their drawing skills. So you could be a more experienced artist and still do Bargue drawings from time to time. You could be a novice, and it would be a good place to start your training in drawing. And the good thing about them is that they're actually a specific target, let's call it, which was meant to do just that. It was meant for the training of an artist. It wasn't, a random photograph of some celebrity, let's say, that you copy from to try to draw faces. And I mean, that's useful, I suppose, but that's a little more haphazard. And to get, the more developed skill, you want somewhat more of a focused enterprise, which the Bargue drawings allow you to undertake. In fact, I should say that a lot of the great painters and illustrators, especially the illustrators, I guess, of the 20th century, so before computers, before digitization, they all worked from life and then eventually photographs. And a lot of them had training from their teachers, and many of them, many of the greatest, had roots back to the French 19th century. And that goes for, let's say, in the great American illustrators, and there were samples of people like this all around the world, but America had a great number. People like Andrew Loomis and Frank Riley, more sort of in the middle to latter part of the 20th century, their teachers had trained with people who had been trained mostly by Jerome in France, but they had their roots there. So the focus on working from life and working from models, which would be, in this case, for example, would be the Bargue drawings. Those were models to work from. So in other words, the point there is that those people went on to do different things. They're some of the great animal artists of both the 19th and 20th century, also trained in academies. They had no intention of drawing and painting people, let's say, but they still studied the classical casts, and they did Bargues, and not only that, people soared on the fine art side, let's call it, contemporary art, what have you. Van Gogh did the Bargue drawings. Picasso did a number of them. His father, in fact, Picasso's father was an academy teacher in Spain, and so he was using the Bargue drawings. Obviously, his son was doing them. He was using the Bargue drawings in his teaching. So these were highly regarded tools for drawing training, regardless of what genre or what field eventually the artist would end up in. In fact, there's a very quick story I'll mention, that when I was teaching at an academy here in Canada, There was a student, there's a couple really, but there was one that she didn't go very far, let's say, in the program. She did Bargue drawings, and she had begun cast drawing from life, from a real statue in charcoal, and she had been doing life drawing. She ended up getting a job with one of the biggest companies in Hollywood, special effects companies, and she worked on some blockbuster films within 6 months or less of being hired. She started working on a couple of the biggest blockbusters of the 2000s. And they hired her not on her ability to use the software, which is very complicated for compositing and matte painting. She became a matte painter. No, she didn't know how to use those programs. She knew how to draw. She knew what things looked like. She knew about accuracy, and that's what they were interested in. They were interested in making things look real, because that's what they have to do in the movies. So that was very interesting, and she was hired on the basis of that. Another person a few years later ended up being working again in movies, except in 3D rendering. I guess, I'm not sure what it's called, the programs that she was using. So it was drawing, but also it was drawing digitally. So anyway, there you have it. You have examples of all the different types of fields that can be benefited from doing this kind of work. And really the fundamental, the ultimate thing is that it's all to work on your drawing. And there's very few better ways to improve drawing skills, or as I said earlier, to obtain drawing skills, than to work from very high quality drawings, and especially in a systematic way, which is what we'll be doing in the Bargue course. So I look forward very much to seeing you in the first video of the Bargue drawing course.